Paul writes like this: you are the building of God. You are the building of God. I love that verse, especially when we are not able to gather in a building. And this word kind of highlighted in me. This word kind of just popped out. You are the building of God. And the next verse is very interesting. He writes like this: according to the grace of God, which was given to me. This is 1 Corinthians chapter 3, verse 9 and 10. According to the grace of God, which was given to me, as a wise master builder, I have laid the foundation. I like that part very much. Because the church in Corinth is looking at many other things that are outward, that was exterior, that doesn't really matter. Paul is now grasping all their attention into one. And he's bringing their light and says, hey guys, come on. I have wisely laid a foundation for you. The foundation none other than Jesus Christ. Paul says, I am a wise master builder. You got to understand this in my language. My language is Tamil, and my language was directly translated. The Bible in my language was directly translated from Greek. So we have one of the best translations. We are gifted with one of the best translations. It goes like this: like a sculpturer. It doesn't say like a builder, like someone who's carving a statue. It says like carving a statue, because they also building in bricks, but the foundation, even now in the East, is always laid with rocks. The rocks that don't have shape. The rocks that are odd in shape, but what they do, they bring a man who can shape it with a chisel and a hammer. And he will start shaping them. Paul says, I shaped a foundation for you. This word touched me. According to the grace that was given to me. There's always a debate about grace versus works. But the life of Paul, no one can write about grace like Paul. No one had such great revelation of grace like Paul. No one would have used the word grace as much as Paul did. That's what I believe. And no one ever had such revelation and depth in grace. But Paul also writes like this. He knew how to use the grace. He said the grace was in vain for me. I labored in that grace. I worked in that grace. I used that grace. I recognized that grace. I increased that grace in my life. When it comes to the debate of grace versus works, I believe that you need to work in grace, work from grace. The moment you understand that, you realize that you are not who you are because of you. You are who you are because of the grace of God. I believe it was 1 Corinthians chapter 15. Paul writes like this, that I am who I am because of the grace of God. And he recognizes his grace right here, and he says, but I am shaping a foundation. I believe this right now. You are the building of God. There is a responsibility that is given to you in this season where we are not able to gather in a church, is to reinforce that Jesus Christ as our foundation. Everything else doesn't matter. Everything else will fade away. The finished work of cross and the identity of you in Christ. What's your identity in Christ? It's time to go back to it and start studying it. Start shaping that foundation. Because there is a special talent, there's a special gift that God has given you. There is such uniqueness that God has created you to be. And He has poured His grace in abundance upon you because He wants you to build this. Because you are the building of Jesus. There are times we are built on many other foundations at times. Especially growing up, we sometimes have many other foundations laid upon us. Parenting becomes a foundation. Some of us have a struggle in understanding gospel is because of the already existing foundation. We find it hard to unlearn. But the more you study the finished work of cross, the more you study what Jesus accomplished on the cross, what happens is when the truth comes in, the truth starts setting you free. When the truth comes inside of you, when truth starts rooting in you, it also starts uprooting every religiosity and every other thing that stops you from grasping the whole truth of Christ. The early church is not perfect, trust me. The early church had its own issues. That's why epistles were written. They had more issues than us. Thank God. That's why the apostles wrote all those epistles for us to understand. Here is Corinth. Paul is writing to Corinth because the Corinth is a city which had beautiful buildings. So they will understand the metaphor that he's using right here. He's using a metaphor to connect and relate with them and says, hey guys, look at me. Don't focus on many other things. Don't focus on I belong to Apollos, I belong to this person. Focus on your foundation. Focus on who you are. Focus on your root. Focus on your basics right now in this season. And you better be very meticulous, very particular, very concerned about this foundation. And start shaping those stones right now. And start building yourself on it according to the grace that was given to me. This word started to minister to me, stir me. Wow, 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 wow. And Paul was building. There are many people out there talking about this is the wrath of God, or this is the judgment of God, the crisis that you're facing right now, the corona and the COVID. I tell you something, if God wanted to pour his wrath upon people, he wouldn't have poured it upon his own son. That's where your perspective changes. The moment you have the foundation of Christ, that breaks the foundation of religion. There are many people who are still stuck in Pentateuch. They're still stuck in Mosaic law. They still don't understand what happened on the cross. That's a problem. Because that affects the perspective. That affects how you see God. That affects how you see yourself in God. And that affects how you see people. And that affects how you're going to take the gospel out. Because gospel is Christ dying on the cross. And you need to understand this. It's easy to judge. To judge is just that's the foundation we are all built on naturally. We need to unlearn that foundation. It was in the island of Malta where Paul survives a shipwreck. And then I believe it's a snake or something that bit his hand. And everyone around him and said, look at him. Right after a shipwreck, there was a snake bite. This guy, oh my God, God hates him. You got to understand this. It's very natural for people to just speak quickly in judgment and condemnation. But it takes revelation. It takes a right foundation where the condemnation in you is torn down. Where the things in you has been torn down. Peter was a guy who was zealous, who took a knife and sliced the ear of a soldier. But God said, Peter, I'm not interested in the Peter who seems to be zealous, but I'm interested in the Peter who will go to the house of Cornelius. Look at this. Look at the difference. Here, the true zeal is receiving the revelation. The true zeal is understanding what was done on the cross. Rebuilding those foundations one more time. As a church, we are in our houses. We are not gathering in a building. It is time to understand we are the building, and we are built on grace. And we are built on the message of cross. We are built on Jesus Christ. Let me encourage you, use this time to reinforce this truth. Like Paul, be a wise builder, a wise sculptor with a vision. He was sculpting it. With a vision, he was shaping it. Guys, it's time that let's get back to the basics. Who we are in Christ. What did Jesus do for us on the cross? And that changes everything. May God bless you.